So our next presenter is Sharon Kaiulani Odom. She is native Hawaiian and is visiting with us from Hawaii, where she lives in Honolulu, and is the project director of the Roots program. So I want to welcome her as she comes and shares her knowledge and her wisdom with us, all the way from the state of Hawaii.
Aloha mai kako o wau o Sharon Kaiulani Odom. Mai ka mokupuni o Oahu I Hawaii. So I am Sharon Kaiulani Odom. I'm from Hawaii. I'm part of the less than 7% that didn't show up on the screen earlier this morning. And I would like to start off by saying thank you to this land here to welcome us and all of the Indigenous people here. I always have so much hope after I leave these kind of events that working together and sharing our knowledge will continue to build our nations to be stronger nations. So thank you for inviting me here today. I'm here to share about Pilinaha. This is our Indigenous framework of health. And we've been working on this just for a couple of years, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the philosophy behind it and how we developed it. So a little bit about myself. I work for Kokua Kalihi Valley. We're a federally qualified health clinic in Kalihi and Oahu, and we're about 45 years old. And so what you see at the top of this screen is we started off in one trailer with 4 workers that went out into the community every day and found out what the community needed. And what the community needed was a health center. So the executive director got the church in that area to sell their land to build a health center. And they actually brought the prisoners out from the prison every day, and they worked on the health center. And then the community gathered together in the evenings, and they brought food to feed the workers. And so we have a long history of food and work and community, all to build health together. And what you see there is our clinic now on School Street. We actually have 9 sites. We have over 150 employees, and we speak 23 languages altogether. We're also fortunate that one of our sites is a 100-acre nature reserve called Ho'oluaina, and we have over 2 acres right now where we grow our own food and medicine up there, and the community can come up and work on these lands. My background is in nutrition. I'm a dietitian, but I've been working in Indigenous health for over 25 years, and so Aipono as a movement, eating healthy as a movement, we understand that our food and our cultural foods and our cultural history and our knowledge are all very important to us. And so when I came to KKV 6 years ago, making food a central part of what we do was very important. You know, I'm always saying that we have these great cultural programs and Indigenous programs, and we often run them while we feed them chili and chips and hot dogs, and we have to remember that for us, for Indigenous people, our food is who we are, and we were healthy as a people, and so all of our programs that serve our Indigenous people should be serving healthy food. Hats off to the culinary department here. I'm really enjoying that they've been introducing foods into the food that they've been serving us, and I'm really thankful for that. And so in 6 years, we've developed a lot of programs. We kind of have them under Grow, Prepare, and Share. So community gardens, community work days, farmers markets, mobile markets. We do a thing called decolonizing diets, where we bring people into the cafe and we just talk. We find some type of topic and we make all the food around that topic, whether it be honey or kalo or invasives. And because I've been hearing about spam, I just wanted to say we also have done a spam night, because we have developed, or actually we found something that we've also adapted. But anyway, we have a healthy spam recipe for you. So for those of you that want a healthy spam recipe, hit me up afterwards. The best ground pork you can buy, a little bit of deli ham with no nitrites, potato starch, garlic, organic sugar, and some sea salt. And you cook it, and you'll feel okay about serving spam at your table. We also have a small cafe in our wellness center that's open 2 days a week, and we serve the healthiest, most sustainable organic food that we can for a relatively low price, so that our community has access to these foods. We have a cultural food hub where we partner with 17 small farmers to bring food into our community, and that we also use this food for all of our programs. We run a family health program where we we get kids from the 3rd to 5th grade. We keep them throughout the year. We teach them about cultural food and protocol. We eat together. We exercise together. We go do cultural things. And we also do cultural birthing classes. And so you can imagine we're 100% grant run. So if you think about all the different measurements that we have to answer to in running all of these programs through grants, it's a lot. It's a lot. We're always saying to ourselves, oh, but is this what really matters? Is this what matters to our community? Is this what matters to our people? And so we started on this journey to say, okay, we can answer these questions, but what we really want to know is, as Indigenous people, what's most important to us? And so we have to then think about, how do we think about food? As a dietitian, I'm taught that it's got calories and it's got protein and it's got carbohydrates and minerals and vitamins. But from an Indigenous perspective, what do we know? E ai ke kahi, e malami ke kahi. So as we feed each other, we take care of each other. These are 2 quotes from Winona LaDuke that I just love that say, the recovery of the people is tied to recovery of food, since food itself is medicine, not only for the body, but also for the soul and spiritual connections to history, ancestors, and the land. Food for us comes from our relatives, whether they have wings or fins or roots. That is how we consider food. Food has a culture, it has a history, it has a story, and it has relationships. For us as Hawaiians, kalo or taro is our older brother. Therefore, both the kalo and the land are older siblings to Kanaka Maoli. It is the responsibility of the older siblings to feed the younger, and they in turn are responsible to care for the older sibling. So just our view of food is much different from a Western view of food when you're looking at our programs. And so we have to understand this as some of our core philosophy as we're looking to our work and to our health work. And so we started on this project about talking story and telling a story about feeling healthy and well. And what does that mean as an Indigenous person? So this is the core of the project was over 4 months. We were looking for Indigenous measures of health. We were looking at stories as indicators and practices as treatment. And so earlier, one of the speakers said she was used to being outside and doing her talk and, with the outside and the elements. And if you were to visit me back home, I'd feed you a really good meal first, full of cultural foods. There'd be a lot of conversation and laughter, and then we would get down to all of this. So I don't have the opportunity to do that first, but that's what we did as we were trying to get all of these stories to come out. In fact, the very first meeting was a 1.5-day meeting, and we had people from, Native Hawaiian health organizations. We had Native Americans, Filipino, Micronesian. We tried to invite as many people as possible, and we invited them to dinner. And one of our workers at the time was a beer brewer, and he brewed beer with the intent of good conversation and laughter, and that's what we served. And the next morning, we brought everyone back, and they could either work on our traditional hale, or they could work in the garden, but they spent the full morning working together. And it was only into the afternoon came that we started talking about health measurements and stories and memories, all of these things that were important. And that was the first part of the 4 months. Over the next 4 months, we had dinners, we had times for people to come together and to tell their stories. And, stories are so important. They're always seem, we have to do the data first and then the stories come in. But if you put a person in the middle of the story, then the stories become the most important. And so here's what we heard, that they're looking for a really different framework of health, that in the existing framework, disintegration as opposed to wellness or wholeness, and that it's, different parts of the body, this part of your body is ill, or this, you have this or this, instead of really looking at the whole person, what's going on with the whole body. And it was always, you go to the doctor by yourself, you get the diagnosis, you're supposed to make the call by yourself, and really they wanted a framework of health where the whole family was involved, the community was involved there, everybody was responsible for each other's wellness. Exclusive, your zip code or where you live or your job could determine what kind of health care you had, and what they wanted was a framework where there was access by everybody to this health care, and that we all put into this health care. You know, deficit and scarcity against abundance, weakness against resilience. I've also long been saying the same thing. Is I've been working in Native Hawaiian health for over 25 years, and you know, even the funders want you to say how sick you are and how poor you are and how bad your statistics are. And when you're on a small island and you're fighting for the same amount of money, then you're sicker than the next community, or you're poorer than the next community. And that in itself is such an unhealthy practice. We have to, it's part of our health story. We have to understand that these are important parts, but what we should be telling more are stories of abundance and our stories of resilience. These are the stories our kids need to hear every single day. They shouldn't be hearing about how we're the sickest people on the island. You know, we have to stop doing that. Existing framework, a test defines, you know, if you're healthy or not, you have diabetes or not, and all of this, but really it should be about a life journey, and even your struggles and your challenges can make you healthier, and how do we incorporate that into our story? And we should all be able to understand the words and the phrases and all of that kind of stuff. It should all be relatable to all of us. And so what we realized is health is connections. And it's this connections framework. We found that after collecting all the stories and going through all of the stories, there were 4 common themes. And these are not separate from each other. They all work together. But we could find four common themes. Connection to place, to have a kinship with the Aina, that's our word for land. Connection to others, to love and be loved, to understand and be understood. Connection to past and future, to have kuleana, responsibility, a purpose in the world, and connection to your better self, to find and to know yourself. And so connection to place, these are just some of the types of questions that would be asked. You know, it's very important as an Indigenous person where you're from. We often, we have a saying called One Hanau, the sands of our birth, and because it's not just about being able to state the name, but it's knowing the name of the wind where you came from, it's knowing the name of the rain where you came from, the valley, or who's there. Aina is very important to us. The word Aina in itself, which is our word for land, Ai means food, and Na is just a pluralization, so Aina means that which feeds you, so that connection we have with the land is very important. We also often ask, oh, where are you from? Because if your family is from Kapa'a on the island of Kauai, I bet you I know someone over there, and we're going to be able to connect that way. So place is very, very important. Some of the practices that we use for deepening connection to place are, you know, working with the land, growing food, mapping the community. I was trying to find articles on decolonizing diets once, and I remember someone saying, you know, if we are Indigenous people of the land, why is it that we know more where McDonald's grows than where the wild rice grows? And so how does our community begin to connect and know where the food that's important to them comes from? Connection to others. Who are you close to? Who do you spend quality time with? Do you have somebody you trust? Do you feel accepted by others? Do you feel good about the work you do? Who do you eat with? Who do you share your stories with? These things are all important. Our doctor, Dr. Giraffe, who is our executive director, and by the way, is from Minnesota. He's been our executive director for over 25 years. He always tells a story about when he first started working, and he'd go in and he'd be wanting to talk to his patients about what they needed to do to be healthier, and they'd want to talk to them about their family and what they were doing, and he would get frustrated, and he finally realized that he needed to sit and talk to them and connect with them, and then he could move on to helping them to have a dialogue together about what they could do. Connection to past and future, and this is really our connection to our culture. What is the story of your ancestry? Are you doing things to make your ancestors proud? What is your language? How you listen to an elder? All of these things are very important as Indigenous people. We, you know, sometimes we have olelo no ea, those are called wise sayings, or in our language, but sometimes you hear, like in the Western world, forge ahead, don't look back, or, you know, it's all about getting to where you're going to go and doing it by yourself. And we know that's not true from an Indigenous viewpoint. It takes a whole community. It takes all of us. And even in Hawaiian, our word for future is kava kahiko, so kava, the time, and kava hope. Kava hope is that past, and so we realize our future is dependent on our time past, and it is a continuum of knowledge and stories. And we run a traditional childbirth class where we try and empower couples to bring back our cultural traditions around childbirth. And we tell the mother that, the mothers and fathers, that you hold the sperm and the eggs of all your future generations in you, because you're going to give birth to your children, who will give birth to your grandchildren, who will give birth to your great-great-grandchildren. So everything you eat, everything you say, everything you do bathes every single cell of all of your future generations. So your health, when you're thinking about health, it's not just, oh, so I can control my diabetes. We're thinking about health in the things we eat and the things we do so that our lands will be clean and we can grow healthy food. So our words that we raise our children and are supporting really strong, resilient children. And that we have to think about health in those long terms, and it's that connection from the past to the future. And our kuleana to all of our responsibility to all of the past and our traditions and our grandparents that we pass on and as we move forward. And connection to better self. What's the story of the last time you felt healthy? You know, I will have to say, as we were collecting these stories and we asked people to tell your story about feeling healthy, and we had them partner up or work in groups. And then at the end, I would say, okay, for how many of you was that story right now? And, you know, only about 10% most of the time raised their hand and said, yeah, the story that I told about feeling healthy is about right now, today. So what does that mean if we're living in a society when our stories of health are really our stories of before I had kids, before I went to school, before I had to work so hard? How do we get people to be telling stories of health that are about today? We had one child in our program, and she had to take a potluck dish to school for the next day, and she was bugging her mom, who worked all day, and she was like, come on, Mom, I want to make this salad for school. And the mom was like, I've had a long day, let's just go to Whole Foods and I'll buy you something healthy. And she's like, no, Mom, we got to make it. And they were going back and forth, and finally she was like, why do we need to make this salad? And she goes, because, Mom, if we don't make it ourselves, our food doesn't have any mana in it. And that was something she had learned. It was, you know, mana about the life spirit, the spirit of the food. And so that story is about better self, and it's about better self for this young child, but also for this mom that she said, wow, she was just really floored that her fourth grade child was bringing her back to where she needed to go with food. So knowing what your gifts are, we're a very gift-oriented place at Kalihi Valley that we always try and recognize people's gifts and to put them in situations where they can best use their gifts. Anyway, these are all interconnected, so if you hear a story about people working together on the land or in the fish pond, gathering seaweed or doing traditional practices, you can actually feel them getting physically stronger. They are connected to who they are and to each other, and they feel power, not power over others, but power and control over their own destiny. So these are the stories that we've been looking at, that we've been getting, striving towards wholeness, towards health, is a process of connecting and feeling connected to things that matter. And we had a big talk about spirituality, because that was really important, and should that be in its own category? And spirituality really ran through all of these connections. So it seems like it's a really easy framework, and that, but you know, we've been using it in really different situations, and it seems to resonate with all types of organizations. And really, it's a lens at which to look through health. It's a lens at which to develop programs. It's a lens to listen to stories or to get to elicit more information, to get people talking about things that are important to them. And so our applications and implications for evaluation, I'm just going to give you a few examples. Like I said, we've only been doing this for a couple of years, but these are some of the areas that we have done. So there is a partnership between our organization, Islander Institute, Department of Native Hawaiian Health, Papa'ololokahi, which is our overseeing all of our Native Hawaiian health organizations, and Hawaii Public Health Institute. And over the past 2 years, they've worked in 18 communities across 5 islands, and they've gathered all of these storytelling sessions, and they wanted to start developing a view of health that was developed by the community, not something that was developed for, but by the community, and by connecting with each other. And so they have begun to collect, and this is like, hospitals and organizations, land-based organization, farmers, they came together, and they've been talking about health, and what is the concept and view of health and an Indigenous health framework that they would like to have in their institution. HMSA is a nonprofit health insurer in the state of Hawaii. It's been there since 1938. It insures over half of our population. And it's one of the few local foundations solely focused on health. And they have over 1,000 employees, and they've been spending time with us over the past year and going out into the community and trying to see how they work with the community. And they have really connected to the framework too. And so they want to use it and incorporate it into their grant-making criteria for the island of Hawaii, or for those that they serve in Hawaii. They've also given us a 2-year grant to implement it throughout the clinic. So while I work with food and land and work in Indigenous health, it's a lot easier for me to implement. But what about the WIC worker? What about the doctor in the clinic who's got to see so many patients? And how did they start to incorporate this framework into the whole clinic? And so they've actually just funded us for 2 years to start to use that. They had a state forum on Pulinaha with 57 participants, 6 islands, same thing, getting people to talk about health from this framework. And so they still have to meet other kind of criteria, but they start to really look at the community and they say, oh, what on our land is important to our community? What are the connections that we're making? What are the stories that we're telling each other for our community? Department of Health in the state of Hawaii has actually funded Matthew Nagato. He previously did a film called Ola, Health is Everything, and they're actually funding him to make a film talking about the state of health in Hawaii, using that framework of Pilinaha in which to tell the story. Research and assessment, Native Hawaiian UH Med School is using some of our findings in their next assessment of health needs for Native Hawaiian people. This is just the nursing and Department of Health have gotten together. They're creating classes on culture. They've asked us to help them with a cultural concept to give to the nursing, a cultural module. And then we've also been invited at the pediatric grand rounds at Kaiulani Children's Hospital. And the chief medical officer said they invited them to talk about the framework because it's too easy in healthcare for the providers to assume they know what their community wants. And he wanted them to hear about perspective on health that comes from the voices of the people. Roadmap for tourism policy, Pilinaha was used at the definition of health. And then we use it in our program all the time. Our staff has gone through several trainings, and whatever program we're running, this is our health program, we try and listen to the stories, and we try and pick out what are the stories, what are the components of each story. This is our Ehuola dinner, this is our family health project, and so leadership, trying new foods, practicing things that their parents or grandparents did, cleaning up the beach. These are all stories that connect. We have a midwife training, or we're training in cultural birthing practices. That's from that one. And we bring together all of our families that have gone through our birthing program together, and we ask them to tell their birth story, and we listen for that. And we use this in all of our reports. Some of my reports only ask me for the data and the numbers, and you can ask my staff. I make them spend a lot of time, and we tell our stories, and we fill them with pictures, and we fill them with these kind of assessments, because someone needs to tell the stories, they need to be recorded. Even if the federal government says, I don't need all of this stuff, we need it documented that this was important to us as Indigenous people. These are the stories that we're told, and these are the ways that we're gaining in health. This is just, I have a couple. If anyone is really interested in this kind of work or how to do that, this is a journal that we developed for our staff to use, and it has, you don't really have to read about the elements, but it's just about how the design has helped the design was made after listening to all of the stories and listening to our framework. And in here, there's prompts about collecting the stories and then reflecting on the stories. And this is something that our staff uses or is in the process of using as they collect stories throughout their day to use the framework. So anyway, that's our 4 connections. Thank you very much for listening.